What would you do if a blind boy calmed a vicious war dog with a single whisper, then revealed a memory no one believed he could have? The tension inside the Caldwell Police Department's canine training facility was thick enough to cut with a knife. Officers lined the walls, arms crossed, jaws tight, their eyes trained on the German Shepherd pacing in the center enclosure. His name was Shadow, but the nickname whispered behind closed doors was the liability. He wasn't just any dog. Shadow was stronger, faster, more instinctively aggressive than any canine the department had ever handled. Trained by military contractors and transferred after an incident overseas, his record was impressive on paper. In real life, Shadow had bitten 2 trainers and nearly mauled a 3rd. Now, no one dared enter the enclosure without riot gear. He was the kind of dog you put down or lock away, not parade around as a department mascot. That's when she walked in. The door creaked open with the slow groan of uncertainty. Ava Carter stepped inside hesitantly, holding the small hand of her son, Noah, pale, slight boy of maybe 8, wearing oversized black sunglasses and gripping a white walking cane. He stood still as a statue, his hand secure in his mother's. Ava's voice was barely above a whisper. "This is Noah. My son. He lost his sight when he was 2, but he's always had a way with animals." A few officers exchanged glances, some skeptical, others amused. Sergeant Richard Cole scoffed aloud. "With all due respect, Ma'am, this ain't a therapy session. That dog's not a petting zoo." But Captain Morgan Tate, a man of 30 years' service and more scars than medals, didn't say a word. He simply raised his hand, then gave a slow nod. "Let the boy try," he said quietly. There was a pause, a heavy, uncomfortable silence filled with unspoken fears and disbelief. Then Ava slowly knelt beside her son. "You ready, baby?" Noah nodded, then let go of her hand. The moment he stepped forward, the room shifted. Shadow stopped pacing, no more growling. His ears pricked forward. His hackles flattened, and for the first time in days, the dog stood still watching. Noah reached the edge of the enclosure and extended one small hand, palm out. His voice came soft and steady. "Hi, Shadow. I'm Noah. No commands." No fear, just a name and a greeting. The room held its breath. Shadow took a step forward. One, then another. His muscles were tense, coiled but not with aggression. It was caution, curiosity. Officers leaned in, hands subconsciously hovering near their belts. They were ready to react, to stop an attack, to shield the child, but it never came. Instead, Shadow walked until he stood directly in front of the boy, and then he sat, just like that. Sat. Noah smiled faintly. He crouched down slowly, reaching out with both hands until they found the dog's snout. "You're not angry," he whispered. "You're just scared, like me." The officers behind the glass fell silent. Some stared wide-eyed. A few blinked back tears they wouldn't dare admit to. Then Noah leaned in and whispered something directly into Shadow's ear. No one else heard it, not his mother, not the captain. Not the officers holding their breath, but whatever he said, it worked. Shadow's posture softened. His breathing slowed, and the wildness, the chaotic, dangerous energy that had once made him a threat vanished like mist in the sun. Captain Tate turned to Ava, voice low and stunned. "Your son just did what none of my best men could do." Ava's lips trembled. She nodded, but her eyes were glassy with fear, because deep down, she knew this wasn't normal. She knew what just happened was impossible, and somewhere inside, a truth she'd spent years burying began to claw its way back to the surface. Later that evening, Captain Tate sat alone in his office, the lights dimmed, staring at the security footage replaying on his screen. Shadow dead calm, Noah unshaken. And that whisper. What did he say? The captain murmured to himself, sipping lukewarm coffee. Across town, Ava sat in silence at the kitchen table, watching Noah as he peeled a banana with methodical precision. He didn't speak. He didn't smile. He just sat, quiet and content, like nothing remarkable had happened that day. But Ava's heart wouldn't stop pounding. She hadn't told them everything. She hadn't told them about the names Noah sometimes said in his sleep names she didn't recognize. She hadn't told them about the German phrases he muttered one winter morning, even though no one in their family spoke German. She hadn't told them that when Noah touched animals, they always stopped, as if listening, as if remembering. Now, Shadow, the most broken, volatile canine in the entire division, had calmed at Noah's voice. Ava gripped her coffee cup tightly. Her knuckles whitened. Because she feared this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning, and whatever came next was something the world wasn't ready for. 3 days passed. 3 long, bewildering days since Noah Carter, the blind boy with the calm voice, had walked into the canine unit and tamed the most unpredictable dog the department had ever seen. And now everything had changed. Officers who once gave Shadow a wide berth now watched him from behind the glass with awe and confusion. He no longer growled at passing footsteps. He no longer barked during feeding time. No snapping, no pacing, no bloodshot eyes filled with rage. He simply sat, quiet, watchful. But not for just anyone. Only when Noah was near did Shadow act like this. When the boy's voice echoed through the kennel hallway, the dog perked up, his body language shifting from tense to attentive. It was as if he were waiting for a command, waiting for a memory. Captain Morgan Tate observed the change with cautious respect. Shadow was no longer dangerous, but he wasn't normal either. His loyalty had clearly transferred. But to what? To a scent? To a sound? Or to something deeper? Meanwhile, across town, Ava Carter stirred awake from another restless night. She sat at the kitchen table in her bathrobe, a half-empty cup of coffee growing cold between her hands. The soft hum of the fridge was the only sound until Noah's small, bare feet padded across the tile floor. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said softly. Noah didn't answer. He simply walked to the window and stood there for a long moment. Then quietly he asked, "Mom, why does Shadow remember me?" Ava's stomach twisted. She forced a smile. "He doesn't. He just likes you, that's all." Noah tilted his head. "But it's more than that. He knew me. I could feel it." Ava's fingers trembled slightly on her coffee mug. Noah turned toward her, expression calm but far too knowing for a child his age. "And sometimes, when I sleep, I hear someone calling his name." Ava's heart stopped. Back at the precinct, Officer Grace Howard was in the basement archives, flipping through old K-9 training records, determined to find anything that made sense of Shadow's past. What she found stopped her cold. Shadow wasn't bred or trained by the Caldwell Police Department. He had been transferred from a private military contractor. The record was brief, redacted, and stamped, "Restricted Clearance, Level 4." But one phrase caught her eye: Operation Ember Shield, classified. Handler presumed KA, K9 reassigned, incident location undisclosed war zone. Grace's eyes narrowed. A missing handler, a sealed operation. A reassigned dog with aggression issues, a child. She swallowed hard. The coincidence was too precise. Could Noah be the child from that mission? Later that afternoon, Shadow was taken out for a short walk in the side yard behind the precinct. He behaved calmly, trotting at the handler's side like a perfect recruit. Until someone dropped a metal baton on the concrete behind him. The sounder, sharp, piercing clang bounced off the walls. Shadow froze, not with alertness, not with aggression. With terror, His body went stiff, his head snapped sideways, eyes wide and glassy. He wasn't there anymore, not really. His mind had retreated, transported back to wherever that sound had first haunted him. Then he collapsed, crouching low to the ground, trembling violently. The officers watching stood frozen, unsure whether to move or wait it out. That's when Noah arrived. He was scheduled for a follow-up visit, but the moment he heard the commotion, he let go of his mother's hand and rushed toward Shadow without hesitation. Everyone shouted for him to stop. He didn't. Noah dropped to his knees beside the quivering dog and leaned in close. Then he whispered, not in English, not in anything Ava recognized. It was a sharp, commanding phrase, spoken in a language none of the officers could identify, but Shadow understood. He stopped shaking. He sat upright. His eyes blinked slowly, like surfacing from a nightmare. Captain Tate stood nearby, pale. What language was that? He asked Ava. She didn't answer because she didn't know. Or maybe, deep down, she did. That night, while Noah slept peacefully with his hand resting gently on Shadow's fur, Ava sat alone in the kitchen. She opened the old lockbox she'd buried for nearly a decade. Inside, wrapped in worn linen, were two photographs. One showed a man in military fatigues, crouched beside a younger Shadow, both alert and battle-worn. The other, the same man, holding a baby boy with jet-black hair. Jack Callahan, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in years, the man who had saved her son from war. The man the government said had died in a failed mission. The man Noah had never stopped dreaming about. Her hand shook as she traced the edges of the photograph. Because if Shadow remembered him, maybe Noah did too. Meanwhile, Captain Tate sat alone in his office again, unable to sleep. He replayed the footage for the third time that night. Noah's hand on the dog's head, that whisper, the instant transformation. He picked up his phone and called Grace. I need you to dig deeper, he said. Into Shadow. Into that mission. Into everything. Grace's voice came through, groggy but alert. I already did, she said. And you're not going to like what I found. The next morning, Grace Howard slipped into the precinct's records room before anyone else arrived. A fresh mug of black coffee steamed in her hand, but she wasn't there for caffeine. She was there for the truth. Grace had always trusted her gut. It had kept her alive more than once on patrol. And right now, that gut was screaming that Shadow, the reformed K9, was more than just a misunderstood military dog. And Noah Carter, the blind boy who'd calmed him with a whisper, was more than just a child with a gift. She sat down in front of a dusty terminal connected to the old archive server. Typing quickly, she entered her restricted login and pulled up the transfer files for Shadow. It took 2 tries. The third was password protected. Then it opened. Transfer record, K9 to 387. Shadow, previous designation, MWD Delta 19. Agency, Crimson Ridge Defense. Private military contractor. Deployment. History, Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria. Final assignment, Operation Ember Shield. Classified outcome, Handler KIA. K9 reassigned. Emotional instability recorded post-incident. Grace leaned back in her chair. Handler KIA. Emotional instability. Reassigned. But where was the handler's name? Redacted. Every mention of him blacked out. And then she saw the tag at the bottom of the file. Child recovered from site. No identification provided. Extraction incomplete. Civilian reintegration pending. Her blood ran cold. A child. From the same op that broke Shadow? Was that Noah? Across town, Ava Carter sat in the backyard of her small home, staring out over the patchy grass, while Noah and Shadow sat side by side under the sun. Noah hummed softly, a tune she recognized but couldn't place. Shadow leaned into him, content and calm. But Ava couldn't shake the memories. The knock on her door 8 years ago. The man in uniform. The words she could never forget. Jack Callahan went off mission. He's presumed dead. If anyone comes asking, deny everything, for your safety. And the child's. She was too scared to ask questions back then. Too broken to fight. So she changed her name. Moved states, started over, and buried the truth with the man she loved. At the precinct, Captain Morgan Tate was already waiting when Grace entered his office. She dropped a printed folder on his desk. These were buried deep, she said. Shadow isn't just a repurposed K-9. He was part of a Black Ops mission, one that involved a child extraction gone sideways. Tate flipped through the pages silently. No handler name. No confirmation of what happened to the child. Just fragments. Redactions. Ghosts. Grace leaned in. I think that child is Noah Carter. Tate's eyes narrowed. And I think his father might have been Shadow's original handler. That night, Ava couldn't sleep. She wandered into Noah's room and found him awake, sitting upright, his hand resting on Shadow's head. Couldn't sleep either? She asked gently. Noah tilted his head. I heard him again. Him? The man with the deep voice, the one who used to say Shadow's name like it meant something. Ava's heart clenched. Do you know who he is? Noah paused. I don't know, but Shadow does. He reached into his nightstand and pulled something out. A collar tag. It had been left in his backpack by mistake after the last training session. Ava took it in trembling hands, etched into the worn metal. Callahan, J. Operation Ember Shield. Property, Crimson Ridge. Ava's vision blurred. It was him, Jack. The next morning, Grace took another risk. She called a contact she hadn't spoken to in years, a friend who'd moved into military intelligence. Do you know anything about Operation Ember Shield? She asked. The man on the other end was silent for a long moment. Then he whispered, hang up. What? I'm not supposed to know. You're not supposed to ask. Just walk away. Why? Grace pressed. Because the handler didn't just go rogue. He disobeyed a direct order. He extracted a civilian, target a child. They tried to erase him. No funeral, no grave. Just vanished. And the kid, a pause. Then, some say he lived. Some say he didn't. But if that dog's still alive, then maybe the kid is too. Click. Call ended. Grace sat there in stunned silence. This wasn't just a story. This was a cover-up. Later that day, Captain Tate called Ava into his office. He was holding the collar tag she'd left in his mailbox, anonymously. She stood frozen. You know this man? He asked softly. Ava nodded. Jack Callahan, he's my son's father. Tate didn't look surprised. Is he alive? I don't know. But you think Shadow does? She nodded again. Captain, there's something inside my son. A memory. A bond. He's not just guessing. He knows things. And I'm scared. Tate leaned forward, his voice firm. I believe you. And if Jack Callahan is still out there, we need to find him before someone else does. Meanwhile, somewhere on the outskirts of Hollow Creek, inside a rundown motel off the highway, a man sat in the dark, flipping through old photographs with gloved hands. One showed him kneeling beside Shadow. Another, more faded, showed him cradling a baby with jet black hair. His eyes lingered. His jaw clenched. And then, softly, he whispered, he remembers. A bolt of thunder cracked in the distance. Rain began to fall. And Jack Callahan finally stood up. It happened again. Noah Carter woke up gasping, heart pounding, the sheets tangled around his legs like he'd been fighting something in his dreams. But he wasn't scared. He was remembering. Downstairs, Ava Carter stirred her coffee in the dim glow of the kitchen window. It was barely 6 a.m., but sleep had long since become a luxury. The house had grown quieter these days, but not calmer. Ever since Shadow came into their lives, something had shifted. She looked up as Noah appeared in the doorway, dressed, alert, like he hadn't slept at all. "You okay, sweetheart?" He nodded slowly. "I heard the command again." Ava's heart skipped. "The same one?" Noah moved toward the table, reached for the banana like he always did in the morning, his movements practiced and calm. It wasn't just a word. It was a memory. Ava tried to steady her voice. "What did it sound like?" Noah paused, then mimicked it low, forceful, and with chilling accuracy. The syllables were German. "Military." It made the hairs on Ava's arms stand straight. She had no idea how he knew that. But Shadow, who had been curled up by the back door, suddenly rose, eyes locked on the boy, ears twitching, as if he'd just been summoned. At the precinct, Captain Morgan Tate watched surveillance footage from the last training session. Again and again, he rewound the moment Noah whispered to Shadow after the dog's PTSD-like panic. It wasn't just soothing, it was a trigger, a command. He paused the footage at the exact moment Shadow snapped to attention, not frightened, not aggressive. Disciplined, like a soldier hearing his commanding officer. Tate stood, grabbed his coat, and headed to the canine archive room. Officer Grace Howard was already there. "You've seen this?" he asked. She nodded, a printout of the same footage in her hand. "I had it analyzed," she said. "That phrase Noah used, it's not random. It's an old German military command, not standard issue, not even NATO. Predecessor stuff, from private contractor protocols." Tate narrowed his eyes. "Which ones?" "Crimson Ridge." Tate exhaled sharply. "The same company from Shadow's file." Grace nodded. "There's more." She handed him a small stack of printed stills, security camera images from the archives, audio logs, a redacted personnel sheet, and then at the bottom an old photograph. Jack Callahan, young, clean-cut, kneeling beside Shadow in full tactical gear. Captain Tate stared at the image in silence. Grace spoke softly. "He's not just Noah's father. He's Shadow's original handler." Back at home, Ava pulled a shoebox from the top shelf of her closet. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside, letters she never mailed, ultrasound photos, a medal Jack had sent before the mission that ended everything. And beneath it all, an envelope marked "Private for Ava." She opened it slowly. 2 photographs slid out. The first showed Jack in uniform, Shadow by his side, both looking off camera as if watching something approach. Their bond was already evident, body language synchronized, posture mirrored. The second made her breath catch. Jack, holding Noah as an infant. The boy, barely a year old, bundled in a tan blanket, fingers curled around his father's dog tags. Her hands trembled. She remembered this moment. The last time they were whole, before the explosion, before the uniformed man arrived at her door. Before the silence. That evening, Shadow began acting strangely. He paced the house, ears constantly swiveling, as if sensing something none of them could hear. Noah noticed first. "He's listening for a voice," he said. Ava crouched beside him. "What kind of voice?" Noah tilted his head. "A deep one. Familiar." "He's not afraid of it, but he misses it." Ava's stomach twisted. "Whose voice, baby?" Noah didn't answer right away. Then, in a near whisper, "The man who used to hold me at night, the one who read stories even when the sirens were close." Ava's eyes stung. She thought he wouldn't remember, that he'd been too young, but memory, it seemed, had its own timeline, and it was catching up. Elsewhere, miles away from the safety of their home, Jack Callahan sat alone in a dim motel room. The rain outside lashed the windows, a steady drumbeat against the silence. In his hand he held a dog collar, weathered, scratched, but still legible. Shadow, MWD, Delta 19. Callahan, J. He stared at the name, then set it gently beside an old photo. Ava, Noah. Him, his family, his past. He had spent years hiding from the people who told him he was a traitor, a liability, a ghost. But he had also been a father, and now something inside him told him it was time to go back. That night, Noah stirred in bed again. Shadow, ever watchful, raised his head as the boy sat upright. Noah whispered something. Shadow stood, walked to the window, stared into the dark like he was waiting for someone. Downstairs, Ava stood in the hallway, clutching the old photo. She could feel it too. Something was coming, something she had feared and missed, in equal measure. Far from Hollow Creek, at a Department of Defense facility in Virginia, a security alert blinked on a terminal. Facial recognition match. 72%. Subject, Callahan, Jack. Status, presumed deceased. Location, Highway Camera, 27B, Hollow Creek region. The analyst frowned. Sir, you might want to see this. The rain had started in the late evening, soft at first, then steady, then relentless. It pelted the windows of the Carter home like it had a message to deliver. Inside, the house was dim, quiet. Ava Carter stood by the sink, her hands deep in dishwater, but her mind far away. The photograph of Jack Callahan and baby Noah lay on the table behind her, its corners worn, its truth undeniable. Across the room, Shadow sat motionless, ears up, staring toward the front door like he expected someone. Beside him, Noah rested on the couch, one hand gently stroking the dog's thick fur, the other fiddling with the old military tag Ava had found in the box. Noah suddenly stopped. He sat up straight, tilting his head as if he were listening to something far away. "Mom," he said softly. Ava turned, instantly alert. "What is it?" Noah's voice was calm. "He's here." The house went still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause for a beat. Then came the sound. One knock, then another. Slow, deliberate, Ava's breath caught in her throat. She stepped toward the door like a woman sleepwalking, pulled by something she couldn't explain. Shadow moved with her, staying just ahead, every muscle taut, every sense on edge. She reached for the doorknob, paused, then opened it just enough to see, and there he stood. Soaked, silent, alive. His beard was heavier, his body thinner. A long scar now traced the right side of his jaw. But his eyes, the way they held her, were unmistakable. "Hello, Ava," he said. The sound of his voice crushed the years between them like glass. She couldn't breathe. Behind her, Shadow let out a low, guttural sound, not a growl. A sound of mourning, of recognition, of something older than memory. From the hallway, Noah walked forward, barefoot on the hardwood floor, his steps certain even without sight. He stopped just behind his mother. "I knew you'd come back," he said. Jack's eyes filled instantly with tears. "I never stopped trying." They didn't rush into each other's arms. There was no movie-style embrace. There was only silence, heavy, sacred, and a storm outside trying to drown it out. Ava stepped aside slowly. Jack entered. Water dripped from his coat onto the floor. Shadow circled him, once sniffed, and then pressed his head against Jack's hip with a low exhale. A confirmation. The bond was still there. Still real, still alive. Later, the three of them sat at the kitchen table. Shadow curled beneath Noah's chair, completely at peace. Ava stared at Jack like she couldn't decide if he was a ghost or a warning. "You didn't die," she finally said. Jack nodded. "No, but they told you I did." "Because I broke the rules." Ava clenched her fists. You left us. I was forced to. He looked at Noah. After the mission, I was told to leave him behind. Just mark the location and move on. But I couldn't. He was crying. There was ash in the air. He had blood on his face, and Shadow wouldn't leave him. Jack's voice cracked. So I took him. I ran. Outside, the storm grew stronger. Wind rattled the old shutters. But inside the kitchen, time stood still. Ava whispered, "Why didn't you come back?" Jack met her eyes. They said if I contacted you, they'd come for him. That he was property of an op gone wrong, a mistake they wanted buried. He looked at Noah. I've been watching from a distance, making sure you were safe. But when I saw Shadow on that precinct footage, I knew the clock had run out. Noah reached out and found Jack's hand. I remember your voice, he said. From the dreams, from the stories in the dark. Jack's throat tightened. I used to read to you every night. Even when we were on the run, even when I thought the walls were closing in. Ava turned away, her face in her hands. She had spent so many years building walls, surviving in silence. And now it was all unraveling. At that same moment, in a sterile office hundreds of miles away, a man in a government-issued suit slammed a folder down on a desk. He resurfaced. Where? Hollow Creek. Get a team? Quiet, no press, no mistakes this time. The folder read, Jack Callahan. Status, fugitive. Immediate retrieval order. Priority, contain and control. Back at the Carter home, Ava paced. They'll come for you, she said. You know that. Jack nodded. That's why I had to come now. Before they did. Noah sat still. They won't take you, he said softly. Jack looked at him, heart full of sorrow and pride. They might, buddy, but not before I make sure you're safe. Shadow stood, moved between them. Ready. Then, headlights. A black SUV pulled up slowly in front of the house. No sirens, no lights, just intent. Jack rose. It's them. Ava looked panicked. Go out the back. We'll stall. No, Jack said. If I run again, it never ends. I have to face it. Noah stood, placing a hand on Shadow's collar. You saved me once, he said. Now it's my turn. The knock at the door wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It carried the weight of years spent in hiding, the sound of men with orders, of rules written in black ink and enforced in silence. Inside the Carter home, Jack Callahan stood still, jaw clenched, hands slightly raised like his instincts were torn between surrender and survival. Across from him, Ava gripped the edge of the kitchen table. Her knuckles were white. Down the hall, Noah pressed his palm into Shadow's fur, the dog's muscles taut like coiled wire. No one spoke. Then another knock. Harder this time. Shadow growled low and dangerous. They're here, Jack said quietly. They're early, Ava muttered, checking the clock. Captain Tate said he'd buy us time. Jack moved to the back door, but Noah suddenly spoke. They're not here for me, he said calmly. They're here for you. Outside, under the downpour, 2 black SUVs idled with their engines still running. 2 federal agents in tactical gear approached the porch, weapons holstered but visible. A third figure emerged from the shadows, Captain Morgan Tate, soaked to the bone but standing firm. He'd followed the agents without backup, without permission. You don't have to do it this way, he told them. The taller agent gave no reply. The shorter one handed Tate a folded piece of paper. Signed this morning. Federal authority. Jack Callahan is to be taken in alive if possible. Tate didn't flinch. Alive if possible, he echoed, voice hard. That dog in there, he remembers more than you do. That man. He's not a threat. He's a father trying to come home. That's not your decision, the agent said flatly. Tate folded the paper and tucked it into his coat pocket. Then go get a warrant. Inside, Ava grabbed Jack's arm. There's still time. The woods behind Hollow Creek, you trained there, remember? Jack shook his head. If I run now, they'll never stop. And if I'm caught running, they'll bury the truth all over again. Noah stood beside him. You told me never to run from what's right. Jack looked at his son, the boy he'd saved, the boy who had somehow saved him back. His voice cracked. I was hoping you'd forget that part. Then Ava moved toward Shadow. She crouched low and whispered 2 words. Go. Now. Shadow bolted toward the back door without hesitation. Jack followed him. Within seconds, they vanished into the trees, swallowed by the dark edge of Hollow Creek. Ava turned and faced the front door, heart racing, mind reeling. By the time the agents entered, Jack and Shadow were gone. Captain Tate stood in the living room, speaking calmly, stalling. You don't have probable cause to search without a warrant, he said, unless you're ready to explain this on the evening news. The taller agent glanced around the room. Where's the kid? He asked. Ava didn't blink. Upstairs, sleeping. Where's Callahan? Tate stepped forward. He's not here. If you're lying, then go get a warrant, Tate said coldly. Deep in the woods, the rain turned the ground to mud, the trees to silhouettes, the wind into whispers. Jack moved, like he was part of the forest, silent, fluid, alert. Shadow was just ahead of him, stopping occasionally to listen. Footsteps echoed behind them. Flashlights cut through the dark like white blades. Jack ducked behind a fallen log, breathing hard. He wasn't afraid. He was focused. They wouldn't take him without the truth. They wouldn't erase Noah again. Back at the house, Noah sat calmly in the living room, hands folded in his lap. Are you okay? Ava whispered. He nodded slowly. He's scared. But not of them. He's scared he won't see me again. Ava knelt beside him. You might have to be brave for both of you, she said. Noah gently touched her hand. He told me I'm the reason he came back. Not to run, but to end it. Back in the forest, Shadow froze, ears up, a faint sound a headwater. The old ranger station. Jack remembered it instantly. Grace Howard was already there, flashlight in hand, soaked, shivering. She had followed Shadow's trail against direct orders. You want to disappear? She told Jack. I'll help you. Jack shook his head. No. I want the truth to come out. Grace knelt and clipped a tracker to Shadow's collar, then let him lead them to it. Shadow looked up at her, then at Jack. A silent vow passed between them. The kind warriors make when no one else is watching. Back at the edge of the woods, the agents advanced. Tate stood firm in the rain, arms folded. You've stalled long enough, one of them growled. Then, from the darkness, Shadow stepped out, standing directly in their path. The agents reached for their weapons. Don't, Tate warned, stepping between them. If that dog's here, Callahan's close, and if he wanted to disappear, we'd never find him. Grace emerged next, breathless. You want Jack? Fine, but you're going to hear what he has to say first. He's a fugitive, the taller agent barked. No, she shot back. He's a father, a decorated veteran. And your people lied about the mission, about the boy. You know it. You just don't want the world to know it too. From the trees, Jack stepped forward. His hands were raised, his voice calm. I won't run, he said. But I speak first, and you listen. Behind the porch light at the Carter house, Noah and Ava stood silently, waiting. Noah tilted his head. They found him, he said softly. How do you know? I just do. And deep in the forest, a final silence fell, the kind that only comes before a reckoning. The woods of Hollow Creek held their breath. The storm had passed, but its echo still lingered in the wet leaves and the distant rumble of thunder. Fog curled between the trees like secrets trying to stay hidden. But not tonight. Tonight, the secrets were coming out. Jack Callahan stood beneath a canopy of oaks, his hands raised, his eyes steady. Across from him, two federal agents in black gear flanked Captain Morgan Tate and Officer Grace Howard. And right between them all, Shadow, unmoving, silent, watching, waiting. Jack's voice was low but firm. "I'm not here to run. I've done enough of that. But before you drag me out of here in cuffs, you're going to hear the truth, the one you tried to bury." One of the agents scoffed. "You're a fugitive." Jack didn't blink. "I was a soldier, a handler, a father." "You made me a fugitive." Grace stepped forward. "Let him speak." The taller agent hesitated, then gave a small nod. Jack knelt beside Shadow, resting a hand on the dog's back. "They used us," he said quietly. "They told me to mark the location of the child and move on. Leave him behind in a building that was about to be leveled." He looked up. "But I couldn't. He was just a baby, covered in soot, screaming, and this dog Shadow refused to move without him." Jack's voice cracked slightly. "So I picked him up, and I ran." At the edge of the woods, beneath the porch light of the Carter home, Noah and Ava waited. He stood still, holding Shadow's old tag between his fingers like a compass. Ava gently touched his shoulder. "You don't have to worry. Your dad knows how to survive." Noah didn't move. "He shouldn't have to survive alone." He turned to her. "I remember his voice," he said. "From the bunker. From the dark." Ava's heart clenched. "You were barely a year old," she whispered. "But memory doesn't forget," Noah said. He stepped forward barefoot, letting the screen door close behind him. "I need to go." Back in the forest, Jack took a deep breath. "For years, I lived in shadows. Moved from motel to motel. Watched Noah grow up from a distance. When I saw Shadow had resurfaced, I knew it was time." He turned to Tate. "I never stopped being his father, even when the government erased my name." Grace pulled a small device from her jacket. "It's all here," she said. Operation Ember Shield, redacted files, handler records, K9 deployment logs. Everything that proves Jack Callahan was never a rogue agent. He was a man who disobeyed an immoral order. One of the agents reached for the file. Grace pulled it back. "You'll get it." But he speaks first. A faint crunch of wet leaves interrupted them. Everyone turned. Noah Carter emerged from the trees, walking slowly, Shadow's old collar tag still in his hand. The forest fell silent. Even the agents lowered their hands. Noah stopped beside his father. Jack's eyes welled. "Hey, buddy." Noah didn't answer. He just reached out, placed his hand on Jack's shoulder, then turned to the agents. "He saved me," Noah said, "just like he saved Shadow." His voice was soft, but the woods carried it like thunder. The taller agent blinked. "How do you know that?" "Because I remember." Grace stepped forward. "Noah's memory isn't like most kids. There are documented cases of early trauma locking in core experiences. But this is beyond that. This is imprinting." Noah looked at Shadow. "When I hear his breathing at night, I feel safe." "Because I've heard it before when we were hiding in the dark." He pointed to the agents. "You were never there, but he was. And my dad was, and I'm done pretending I don't remember." Jack dropped to one knee. Noah leaned into him, forehead against his father's. Shadow sat beside them, pressing his body into both of theirs like an anchor to a past neither of them had truly escaped. Grace handed the file over. "I suggest you read it before you decide how to label this man." The taller agent opened the folder under the beam of his flashlight. His expression shifted slowly from skepticism to disbelief to something close to shame. Jack stood. "If you're going to arrest me, do it. But don't lie about who I am anymore." A long pause. Then the agent looked at Captain Tate. "You said we had 30 seconds, he said. Tate nodded. That was 30 minutes ago. The agent sighed. We'll report the contact. Nothing more. He closed the folder. We never found him. The group began to disperse. Grace stayed behind. You're not just a handler anymore, she told Jack. You're a story now. One they won't be able to bury. Jack looked down at Noah. Then at Shadow. I don't want to be a story, he said. I just want to go home. Back at the Carter house, Ava saw them approaching through the mist, three silhouettes moving together, slow but steady. Father, son, and the dog that remembered everything. She opened the door, and this time no words were needed. The next morning, the air in Hollow Creek was strangely still. It was the kind of stillness that comes after something sacred has been broken open and before the world decides what to do with the pieces. In a cramped office at the Caldwell Police Department, Captain Morgan Tate sat across from a man he didn't know and didn't like. The man wore a black suit, no name badge, no insignia, just a slick folder marked classified and the cold confidence of someone who never had to explain himself. He slid the folder across the table. Jack Callahan is still under federal watch, the man said. His disappearance years ago doesn't absolve him of protocol. If he resurfaces, we'll take custody, immediately. Tate didn't blink. Custody of a man who saved a child from a war zone? The agent closed the folder slowly. That man went rogue. He disobeyed orders, compromised a covert mission, and smuggled a civilian minor across borders. Tate's jaw tightened. And that civilian minor is a blind boy who calmed a broken canine with a whisper and just told your agents things only someone who lived it could know. The agent stood. That's not your concern anymore, Captain. But Tate leaned forward, voice low. No. It's your nightmare now. Across town, in the Carter home, Jack sat at the kitchen table, towel drying Shadow's damp fur. Noah stood beside him, carefully brushing the dog's ears with quiet precision. It was as if nothing had happened. But Ava knew better. She paced the living room, holding the printed photos and field documents Grace Howard had dropped off that morning. Documents that confirmed everything: Jack's role, Shadow's origins, and the truth about Operation Ember Shield. She looked up at Jack. They're not going to let this go. Jack nodded. I know. They'll find a way to silence it. Or twist it. Noah chimed in quietly. Then we speak first. Ava looked at her son. You sure? He turned his face to her, calm, steady, far older than his years. They tried to erase my name, just like his, but they can't erase what we remember. Back at the precinct, Grace pulled up the surveillance log from the ranger station the moment when Jack stepped out, hands raised, Noah beside him, Shadow at their feet. She clicked save. Then she opened a new file, a report titled K9-387, Behavioral Recovery and Civilian Memory Link, Unclassified Summary. She attached photos, field audio, Noah's statements, even transcriptions of the German command the boy had used. Then she sent it off-network to a journalist she trusted, not because she wanted glory, because someone needed to protect the truth in case everything else fell apart. That evening, the federal agents returned. This time they didn't knock. They came with quiet footsteps and clipped words. Noah saw them from the window. They're back. Ava opened the door before they reached it. Jack stood behind her. Shadow moved like a shadow, silent but present, always between danger and the boy. The lead agent handed Ava a document. Federal request. We're placing Mr. Callahan under restricted surveillance. He is not to leave the state. Any attempts to flee will be treated as obstruction. Ava scanned the page. He's not a criminal. He's a liability. Then Noah stepped forward. He's a witness, he said. And I'm the proof. The agent hesitated. Captain Tate appeared from behind them. You heard the boy. The agent turned to him. You're risking your career standing here. I'm risking more by saying nothing. An hour later, At a town hall office turned impromptu conference room, Grace, Tate, Jack, and Ava sat across from a local legal advocate and a quiet man from Veterans for Justice. Jack told his story start to finish. Grace presented the report. Tate vouched for every word, and then Noah's soft voice, no stutter, told the room what he remembered. The sky was loud, Shadow barked, but it wasn't scared barking. He was protecting me. Someone told Daddy to leave me, but he didn't. He held me and said, "We're going home, buddy." And Shadow followed us all the way to the river. The room was silent. Not out of disbelief, but out of shame. Later that week, a redacted version of the file was leaked online. It didn't name names, but it told the story, and the public listened. Not because it was sensational, but because it felt real. A boy, a dog, a father who broke the rules for love, and a system that punished him for choosing life over orders. The federal warrant wasn't formally dropped, but it was quietly shelved. Jack was no longer hunted, but not exactly free. So he chose the only thing that ever gave him peace. He went home. Back at the precinct's K9 division, Noah returned as a regular guest, not as a mascot. As something more. He didn't train the dogs, he listened to them. He sat quietly in the kennels, hand resting gently on trembling fur, whispering softly, like he had with Shadow. One by one, the most broken K9s began to heal. They didn't respond to orders. They responded to Noah. His gift wasn't command, it was remembrance. That night, as the sun set behind Hollow Creek, Jack sat on the porch with Noah beside him and Shadow at their feet. Ava brought out mugs of cocoa, still warm. Noah turned to his father. "Do you think they'll ever come again?" Jack took a long breath. "They might, but next time, we won't be alone." He looked at his son. "You ready to tell the world your story?" Noah smiled, eyes behind dark lenses reflecting the gold of dusk. "I already am." The news trucks never came. There were no flashing cameras, no headlines splashed across national outlets, no viral hashtags, just silence. But in that silence, something powerful happened. Peace. For the first time in nearly a decade, Jack Callahan wasn't looking over his shoulder. He was home. The old ranger cabin by Hollow Creek had been repurposed. Once a military training outpost, it now belonged to Jack and Lone from the town, thanks to Captain Tate and Grace Howard. It wasn't much, but it was safe, quiet, and theirs. Jack spent his mornings fixing the fence, chopping firewood, and helping at the K9 Center, where Noah had become somewhat of a legend. The staff called him the listener. He didn't give commands. He simply sat among the dogs, let them come to him, let them rest their weary bodies against his legs. Some were aggressive, some were afraid. All were broken, and one by one they began to trust again, because Noah didn't speak to their behavior. He spoke to their pain. One foggy morning, Jack and Noah sat on the porch, both cupping warm mugs of cocoa. Shadow lay at their feet, tail thumping now and then in contentment. "You know what I whispered to him that day?" Noah asked suddenly. Jack smiled. "What?" The boy leaned closer, voice soft. "Home." Jack's eyes filled. "Why that word?" "Because I didn't know his name, but I knew what he was looking for." Jack nodded slowly. "And now?" Noah smiled, head tilted toward the trees. "Now he doesn't have to look anymore." Later that day, Ava joined them. She didn't speak, just sat on the step, hand in Jack's, her other arm wrapped gently around Noah's shoulders. No one needed to say it out loud. After years of running, hiding, remembering in pieces, they were finally whole. Shadow let out a long, peaceful sigh. It wasn't the sound of a soldier on alert, it was the sound of a dog who had finally come home. Spring came slowly to Hollow Creek, like a promise kept. The frost melted from the rooftops. The creek sang again. The trees bloomed with soft greens and whispering wind. And inside the old ranger station, turned home, life truly began. At the K9 unit, Noah Carter no longer sat alone. He was now the heart of the center's trauma program, a child with no formal training, yet more insight than any manual could teach. Broken dogs came in every week. Some had been abandoned, others had served in wars they never chose. Many had been labeled hopeless. But when they reached Noah, they paused, sat, and listened. Because he listened first. His presence was quiet but unwavering. He didn't teach obedience. He restored trust. On one particularly warm morning, Jack Callahan watched from the side of the yard, arms crossed, a slow smile tugging at the corner of his lips. He'd seen soldiers freeze in fear and men fall to grief. But this, watching his son rebuild what war had broken, this was the bravest thing he'd ever seen. Beside him, Ava stepped up quietly. "He's becoming who he was always meant to be," she whispered. Jack nodded, "because we finally stopped running." That afternoon, the family returned home early. Noah and Shadow curled up together on the porch, the old dog's eyes fluttering in sleep, head resting in the boy's lap. Jack handed Noah a small wooden box. Inside, a new name tag for Shadow, etched carefully in brushed steel. Home K9, retired loved. Noah ran his fingers over the letters. "I said it that day," he whispered, "and now it's true." Jack ruffled his son's hair. "You brought us back, buddy. All of us." As the sun dipped behind the hills, casting golden light across the porch, the three of them sat together. Jack, Ava, Noah, and Shadow, wrapped in silence, not from loss, but from completion. No news crews, no medals, no official apologies. Just the quiet victory of a family who had been torn apart by war and healed by memory, by love, and by a dog who refused to forget. And when night came, and Shadow let out one last sigh for the day, Noah whispered the word that had started it all. Home. Life message. In a world that often forgets, this story reminds us of what truly endures: love, memory, and loyalty. Noah's bond with Shadow wasn't taught, it was remembered. It teaches us that some connections run deeper than time, deeper than logic. When all systems failed, it was a boy's quiet voice and a wounded dog's silent trust that brought a broken family back together. Jack's return was not about reclaiming a past, it was about honoring the truth. Sometimes, doing what's right means breaking the rules written on paper to follow the ones written on your soul. For those of us who have lost, who have hidden truths to protect the ones we love, this story offers hope. It's never too late to come home. Whether it's a child, a parent, or even a loyal companion, you never really lose those who are written into your heart. And healing doesn't always come with noise. Sometimes it arrives quietly on a rainy night, with a familiar voice saying just one word: home.